Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
Welcome to the weekend, folks. And yeah, this is the place to be. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. I'm Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com. Joined as always by my man, Dwain McFarland. You know his great work over at PFF and ETR. And you might be wondering, what are these guys doing on a Friday night on my computer, on my phone, on my headphones? Well, you've been asking all year long, well, literally for 3 years, can you please do some DFS content? We want a DFS hustle show. So we went out. We happened to find two of the smartest guys in the industry who just happened to have nothing to do on a Friday night. And we said, why don't you come join the party with us? So that's what we did. We found our guys, Cody and Ryan Reynolds. You read their great stuff over at EstablishTheRun.com. And they're going to hang with us here for the next hour. And we're going to go over some game stacks and correlation and general DFS strategy. And if some of that is new to you, you know, to the audience that listens to the hustle, we'll try to educate you a little bit, but we're not going to talk to some of our smarter fans like they're morons either. We're going to, you know, give you really good in-depth content so everybody can build good lineups, be a smarter player, and hopefully win some cash. So Dwain, what's going on, man? You excited for this?
Yeah, dude, we've been talking about this, like you said, for a long time. So, and having two guys like Ryan and Cody to jump in and help us with it, and really help kind of lead the way for us, I'm super excited. You know, it's something just for the audience. Like Drake and I have talked about it, but we've never truly done it. Just because anything we do, we want to do really well. And so, having Cody and Ryan interested, you know, that immediately lifted our game. So we were like, we think we can do something like this and do high quality now. So I'm excited about it.
So let's introduce the guys. Okay, Cody, you're kind of known as this showdown slate guy. So kind of how did you become the king of the showdown? And just give us a little background on yourself and your theory on DFS.
Yeah, for sure. Quite the intro. I appreciate it. I got my start through ETR, as Ryan did. But mine was a little bit different. I emailed their support team maybe a week or two after launch and just explained my interest in helping out with preseason stuff. I had kind of crushed preseason DFS for a couple of years, and when Adam and Evan launched the site, I kind of immediately fell in love. So I emailed their support team and just explained that I was interested in helping out wherever possible. So they asked what I would be interested in helping out with. So I mentioned preseason, and one of the founders emailed me back and said, "Well, send us some writing samples." Well, I had never written at that point, had anything to send to them. So I stayed up one night and wrote 2,000-ish words on, it was the Denver Broncos, Atlanta Falcons Hall of Fame game showdown slate, which is just like, so I sent them an article and it made its rounds, and they messaged me back and said, you know, we're not really looking for any long form content. That was early in the day. And then they sent me another message back that same day and said, well, you know what, we could use you to help us scour some news and things of that nature. So I helped out for the first preseason last year. And then as that wrapped up, they asked me to kind of come on and help out with Showdown. I actually hadn't played a ton of Showdown leading into the 2019 season. So I kind of made it my life's mission to track as much stuff as I could and to keep as much data as I could to try and make good lineup decisions. So that's kind of where I got my start. Kind of started with the showdown stuff on the content side, but I've been playing, main slate DFS for 5-6 years now. So I think I have a good understanding of the game as a whole, and I think I can kind of apply some of the things that I've been doing with showdown content to main slate too. So
very cool. If you want to follow Cody on Twitter, he is at CMain7. That's CMAIN7. We got to give a shout out to our guys, 5 Yard Lee and PD Stitzinger. He's over at Fighting Chance for helping us with the graphics tonight. Kind of last minute, because that's how I roll. These guys are our saviors, and we really appreciate the work that they do to help us out. Ryan Reynolds is a guy I'm really looking forward to drinking a beer with down at the Jersey Shore. Because he just has this kind of, I don't want to say grimy edge, But he's got the Giants winter hat on right now for you folks listening on iTunes, and he's got this great radio voice, and you can tell he's gambled in a few like back alleys that he probably shouldn't have been in. And like, I'm just intrigued by where this guy is going to help take the hustle. So Ryan, why don't you come in and let us let everybody know what you're all about in terms of DFS and gambling and all that good stuff.
Grimy edge. I've never heard that before, but some of the other stuff I have been told some of the other things before. But yeah, I've been betting on sports since my entire adult life. I would actually say I got my feet wet in this space when I was a kid. My father used to use cards as a way to invest in athletes. So I've been doing that since I was 8 years old, under his supervision for a while, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I would consider myself more of a sports bettor than a fantasy player. But last year when ETR started, I had kind of talked with Evan here and there about, maybe potential content creation opportunities in the future. They needed a waiver wire guy. I got my foot in the door that way. I write a preparing for the playoffs article now, which I started in week 8, and I try to kind of predict who will be valuable or who's undervalued now. They'll be valuable 4 or 5 weeks from now. And this year I also started an awards column where I think I've done pretty well with that as well. So my angle in DFS is I try to handicap games and then project how for instance, we're going to talk about over-unders tonight. If I like an over on a total and I can figure out how I think the coaches are going to handle the game planning of that game, I'll tend to play those games heavier than I will anything else. Mm-hmm. So that's generally my stance on things.
And just so you guys know, when we're doing the Hustle Show on Tuesday nights, I have Ryan Reynolds' waiver wire article up on my screen. So this guy does really, really good work. If you're over at ETR, definitely check it out. These two guys are rising stars in the industry, and we're so happy to have them come hang out with us. So, guys, it's Friday night. We've got all these great games on tap. Let's get going here. Let's talk a little Week 15 DFS. So what we're going to talk about here is a game stack. And we've got a couple of games that we've highlighted that we think there are the best possibilities for winning game stacks. So I want you guys to kind of go through, what is a game stack? Why is it important? And then we'll get into it with the Saints and Chiefs, which is going to be our first game on the board. So Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about the game stack and why players need to go that route?
For me, from my angle, this is something Cody will be very insightful on too. Like I said, I project overs. I don't actually care what the projected total is. I care about where I think it's going to go. So if I think if a game's projected total is 51 and I think it's going to exceed 60 points, I want a quarterback and receiver on one team, and then I want to bring it back with a receiver from the other team. Mm-hmm. Because we're looking for shootouts, and I'm looking for shares of that shootouts. Cody, why don't you give your angle on that? Because you're more of a game stack guy than I am even.
Yeah, I mean Ryan nailed it, and it's really pretty simple. But if you played DFS before, if you're new or you're looking for angles to try and improve your play, the way to improve your play is to correlate your lineups, and the easiest way to do that is through game stacks. And the reason why we do that on DraftKings, there's 9 potential roster spots, including defense. We want to try and limit the number of decisions we have to make and the number of things that we have to get right in order to build a winning lineup. And some of you might already be doing this in season long. If you haven't played DFS, you might be pairing your quarterback with a wide receiver to maximize ceiling. But it's the same thought process on DFS main slates. It's just cranking the volume up to 11 because we want to try and maximize when our quarterback goes off. We have him with 1 or 2 of his pass catchers, sometimes 3 of his pass catchers, and somebody on the opposite side. So that's the most generic way to think through why we're so invested in game stacks. But there's other things that we're concerned about too, and that we can talk about, and we'll get into some of this too. But we'll get into many correlations with wide receiver and opposing wide receiver. There's some running back defense stuff, but mainly we want to, when we're playing DFS, we don't want to have a 9-leg parlay that we're trying to hit every leg on. We want to guess one thing right. And in this case, it'll be the game that we think has the ceiling to produce a slate winning type of score for multiple guys. So we'll touch on some of those. But the main thesis behind why we game stack in DFS and why we're so concerned about correlation is we want to limit the number of things we have to get right. And when one player goes off, i.e. if we're rostering Patrick Mahomes, we want to have him paired with multiple pass catchers. Because if he produces a slate winning score, he's going to bring along his pass catchers with him.
So let's start off here with the Saints. The Saints are they're +3. This game total is at 52. They're playing against the Chiefs. You would expect this to probably be the most played game on the slate. You're going to get a lot of people who want to get a piece of this one. So let's go to Dwain, because what he does better than anybody in the industry is talk utilization. And the usage in this seems to funnel through Alvin Kamara. We got Drew Brees coming back in this one. He's 5,900 on DK. All my pricing, guys, by the way, is on DraftKings for the listeners out there, just because I like DraftKings. So that's where we're going. And Alvin Kamara is, in my mind, Dwain, going to just get fed and fed and fed. It's 7,400 is his price tag. He averages 13.2 more PPR points a game with Drew Brees. We got no Michael Thomas. So what are your thoughts from a usage perspective on this Saints offense?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it, Drake. Kamara's going to be great. You got Michael Thomas, who's going to be out. So I think it's going to be Kamara, more Kamara, more Kamara. I mean, if you look at the targets in the games with Drew Brees, 7, 9, 14. He did have a 4 in there, 10, 8, 12, 6, 8. And then you get Taysom Hill, 1, 1, 3, and then 10, because they were finally in a trailing script to your Eagles. I don't know how they managed to trail on, so many of their snaps that game. But, yeah, so Kamara is going to be huge. And I think, so the other guy that, Brees was really starting to get some chemistry with and who's really cheap on DraftKings is Emmanuel Sanders. Mm-hmm. And so I think he's going to get force-fed. Now, the Chiefs haven't necessarily been an easy matchup in the secondary, but it's not necessarily just because they have great cornerbacks. It's more of it's a unit. They don't run a ton of cover zero and things like that where they leave guys out on islands. They don't challenge teams a lot. Typically, they play from ahead. So they play, they just don't want teams getting big plays on them, basically, right? So if they can just keep things in front of them, they know their offense is going to typically outscore the other team. So they're not just taking a ton of risk. So that takes a little bit of the ceiling out, but Sanders is a guy that can he's still at the point where he can get open against most people in the league. He's a really good route runner. And like I said, he and Brees were starting to show, some chemistry. So I don't know where Kamara's ownership's going to, end up so from a GPP perspective, like what I was looking at earlier, it's way too low. That's going to shift now that people know Brees is in there. I think I saw earlier, even on Establish the Run, it was 7%. I think that number is probably going to get closer to 25%, maybe 30%. That's my guess. I would lean into Cody and to Ryan. They can probably project that better than me. But I think as people start to think about the game, and the fact that Brees is back, everybody's going to realize that Kamara is underpriced, right? He should be priced, up in the 8,500 to 9,000 range on DK, and he's not. Mm-hmm. So, I think, but it's a guy like that though with Kamara. I don't get cute. I'm not going to just, everybody else is going to use him, I'm going to fade him. I mean, at that price, he's going to pay off. He's going to score your 21, to 30 points. It's just going to be there. So I'm definitely sticking with him. And then as far as, the Chiefs go, people know. I don't really need to go into it. Everybody's Tyreek Hill will probably be the most owned wide receiver on the slate. He's got slate breaking ability though, so that's okay. I don't think it's going to be super high, right, where he's going to come in, but I think he probably will be the top owned receiver on the slate. And then Kelsey, is one of the very few tight ends that you can feel okay about paying up for. I typically punt at tight end, but if I'm not going to punt, Kelsey's the guy that I go to. Just because he's going to see 6 to 8 targets, every single game. We've seen that over the last several weeks. I think actually he may have a record that he's about to break right now. Actually, if he has another 8 target game, I think he'll have the most 8 target games in a row for a tight end, something along those lines. But here are his targets: 10, 12, 10, 9, 12, 10 over the last several games. He's not cheap on DK. He's 8K, which is way higher than some of the tight ends you can get down in the 3,000 to 4,500 range if that's what you want to do.
What do you guys think about this? It's going to be highly owned. We've got Mahomes over here at 7,900, CEH, who's, kind of disappointing us. Where are the pieces coming from for the stacks in this game? Cody, start with you.
Yeah, and Dwain nailed it. he's projected for 7% ownership right now on established run, and that's not going to hold. It's something that Ryan and I talked about coming into the week. He was like the great leverage play off of a popular Derrick Henry, right, which we'll touch on in a little bit, but it's not going to be the case anymore. He's probably the best running back play on the slate now, almost certainly the best running back play on the slate now. So he's going to certainly catch ownership. The way that I think about these stacks, because they're going to be popular, you don't need to certainly just fade a stack because it's going to be popular. Certain game stacks can still get there with high ownership. But the thing about the Chiefs is they're pretty efficiently priced this week. And I don't have it pulled up, Drake, if you do, but like
they're actually the Kelsey's the highest priced tight end. Tyreek Hill's the highest priced wide receiver, and Mahomes is the highest priced quarterback. He's 7,900. Kelsey's 8,000. Hill's 8,800.
So like a double stack with Mahomes and Tyreek and Kelsey is almost out of the question. It's you're almost asking for too much for that to.
I tried before the show. It's tough. I saw that was our first one. I tried some stacks on several of these, because I haven't done any yet. I usually start doing them on Saturday, but it's going to be really, really tough because there's not a ton of huge value plays this week. I know we may talk about that more later, but it's not like there's just these screaming super cheap guys that can help you get there, with some of these bigger lineups.
Right. And the thing is, if you're going that route and you think that's the route to go, you're going to end up playing like a Traequan Smith or an Emmanuel Sanders on the other side, who's going to be popular. So the way that I'm thinking about my KC stacks, which I will have some of, I'm not going to completely write off the game because it's going to be the most popular owned. I'm going to think through the way that I want to build these lineups in a way that still keeps me unique enough that I'm not competing with a high percentage of the field. So I think you can run out Mahomes with one of Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, and then pair him with Watkins, or you can run out a single stack and just hope you get like that alpha game, like we saw from Tyreek Hill against the Bucs, where at their price, like maybe Kelce doesn't completely fail, but maybe he fails for salary expectations. Maybe he gets 16 or 20, and that's not enough at the tight end position to separate and produce a slate winning type score. So when you're thinking through these things with something especially as popular as the KC New Orleans game is going to be, you just kind of have to think about the routes in which the game can play out, where it's not too owned, but it also has routes to producing slate winning type scores. So like I said, one way that I'm thinking through that is just a Mahomes double stack with like Watkins, one of Kelce and Hill plus Watkins. The other way is you can double stack Breeze on the other side and still hope you get that alpha game out of one of the Kansas City guys. So like as Dwain mentioned, you get Kelce, who's like the only guy at tight end who can really separate this week. You don't have Kittle to contend with. You got Mark Andrews, but you don't have Darren Waller to contend with. So like Kelsey's the one guy that can separate and put up 30 points, whereas everybody else scores like 15. And it becomes the score that you really need to win a GPP. So the other way, that's one way that I'm thinking through it. Like you can go Breeze plus Kamara plus Sanders and run it back with Kelce. And I think you can still use it that way. And we'll talk about some of the low on running backs and some of the other guys that we like to pair those
just on some of the cheaper options, just real quick, that Cody called out, people want to know. So like on Watkins over the last 3 weeks, he's seen his routes increasing every week. So 73, 76, and then 90%. So he was in a route on 90% of Mahomes dropbacks. I will take any receiver that's on the field for over 80%, with Mahomes. So, and Watkins is still really cheap, 4,600. So I agree. I think that's a good way to differentiate. Even if you use Hill or Kelce, there won't be a ton of lineups, bringing, Watkins, back. Like there's going to be sharper players that are definitely going to build that stack, but it is going to help you differentiate, for all of the Mahomes / Tyreek Hill shares that you're going to see out there.
So Ryan, let's get your take on this. It's got a game total of 52. First, I want to know how you're betting this game. And then if you see it going so far over, how does that kind of skew the lineup that you're building? And a guy I like, by the way, Traequan Smith, 3,200, back-to-back 6-target weeks with a guy who's not even really a quarterback. So I love him.
Yeah, sure he's not. This is the sort of game I wouldn't directly bet. because there's a wide range of outcomes. Do I think the Saints can win? Absolutely. The Chiefs have only lost one game this year, and this is probably the last chance they have of losing a game for the rest of the year. So on betting the side for this game, I wouldn't. The total, my stance on that would be take the over or stay away from it. Because, again, you're betting on Mahomes in a dome. The Saints have a good defense, but they don't exactly have a tempo-setting shutdown defense, if that makes sense. They have a we can mitigate damage type of defense. And in general, in 2020, it's different than when we were kids, you know. Defense now is it basically mitigates offensive opportunity, you know. Very few defenses have enough talent to actually shut down real opponents. So I'm not scared of that from that end. The Chiefs have a similar defense where they have some tools. They have a few pass rushers. They have a few good players in the secondary where they can give you a game where they hold a team like the Saints to 24, 27 points, but I wouldn't have any interest in betting on that outcome. So I'm seeing this game more as both teams get in the 30s myself. I'm also on the same page with Watkins. I really like him. He primarily plays in the slot, right, Dwain?
From the slot right now over the last few weeks, 48%, 60%, and 50%. So yeah, he's at least half of his routes are coming out of the slot. So it's tough to get, trailed by, either of, there's really only one good corner on the Saints, and we can argue if he's good.
Right.
He's good some games and bad and terrible others.
Right. Right. And Tyreek Hill's speed is, in my opinion, he's the most dangerous skill position player in the game. I'm not even sure who I'd say is number 2, because his speed is something. If you're a play caller, at minimum, you have a single high safety cheating towards his side a little bit. So that opens up other opportunities for other players. Kelsey's also someone that demands extra attention. The phrase double teaming someone doesn't really happen very often, but you can give what I term as help coverage. Maybe you take a slant away from someone with a linebacker drifting into that space. So
the Saints have only double teamed 8 times this entire year.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's
to your point. It doesn't happen a lot.
Right. It's not going to happen a lot. Where Watkins is going to see a lot of one-on-one coverage. He's not going to see any real help coverage either. So I'm interested in him as well. I would view it as a long shot bet, if that makes sense. Right? You know what I mean by that? There's definitely a very real path to him failing or him catching 4 passes for 50 yards, but from a value standpoint, he has a higher ceiling than his price would indicate. And I like his matchup in particular. As Cody knows, I'm very willing to fade chalk completely without even like a second thought. You can't fade Kamara this week. He's priced too low. His floor in this game is probably 8 catches for 60 yards and 60 yards rushing, that's probably what his floor is. So I might even end up being overweight on him ultimately. Also, like Sanders, do you guys have any thoughts on Cook? Because I need counsel when it comes to tight ends these days.
He actually wasn't killing it when the last few weeks of Breeze. People always think, he was down because Taysom Hill came in. If you look at the last 3 games that Breeze played, he didn't do anything.
Yeah. Right, I know. It's been very disappointing as a Saint, I'd say.
Yeah, his issue, we talk about it all the time, for the folks that listen to The Hustle. You want tight ends that, they're running a route on, say, 70%, right, of the drop back. You get up over 80, you're getting into elite territory. Typically, you only have 5 or 6 tight ends that can stay over that mark, for the season. And the problem with Cook is it goes really all over the board. He'll be at 45%, then he'll drop down to 58. He'll bump up to 78. Then he's at a 54, a 38, a 66, a 40, and then last week a 63. And, I've looked for a pattern. I can't find one. It's something to do with what they see as far as a matchup and the way that they're wanting to handle the game, which just doesn't show up necessarily in the data that we're looking at. I know there's a reason that Sean Payton's doing it. I just haven't been able to identify it. So I just typically avoid Cook every week because I don't know when to use him.
Same here. Excellent. I know I'm on the right page there because I'm in the same boat. I don't exactly – because Sean Payton's an excellent coach. As we can see, him winning 3 games with a guy who's not even an NFL quarterback. But, I haven't been able to figure out why – what's that?
The other problem for me with Cook is I just don't – there's no upside, right? Basically, you're just hoping he catches one touchdown. He's not giving you a lot as far as targets. He's seen 7 one time this year, but he's typically in the 2 to 3 or 1 range. So that's, I don't know. I don't, it's not, if he doesn't score a touchdown, right, you're dead in the water.
Right.
And there's really not a chance that he's going to show up and give you a 100-yard game and 7 catches plus a touchdown. Like it's not even a possibility, really. I mean, there's a chance. Everything has a chance, but the probability is so low. I just don't like it.
Yeah, it would take a failed coverage for him. I agree. No, I'm on the same page there.
Anything else on this game, or you guys want to jump to the next one?
The one thing I'll say before we close is every team should invite the Chiefs to run. So that gives me some shimmer of hope with Clyde Edwards-Helaire every week. But yeah, I'm not really in love with that play this week either.
Yeah.
Our next contest that we're going to be looking at is the Titans and the Lions. Titans are the Lions are -11. This is a game total of 51.5. So some notes on this game. You're looking at maybe Matt Stafford. We're not exactly sure. They're saying they could let him play without practicing all week. Who knows? This is as Alvin Kamara was so popular in the first game, this is a Derrick Henry game. 9,500 is his price on DraftKings, coming off a 2-touchdown, 215-yard performance last week. The Lions give up tied for the most fantasy points in the NFL on the season to running backs, a little over 31 points a game. So this is a spot where if you either get Kamara, you go that route, or you're going to go Henry. I think there could be 2 trains of thought in terms of building stacks. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on, okay, maybe we can't go Kamara. Can we fit in now? Let's build a Henry lineup. What do you guys think about him this week?
I can start with Henry because their usage take will be interesting. One thing I'm very much on team. If you're building an organization, you don't want to overpay for running backs. I'm very much on that side of the fence. But there are certain running backs that are real assets, and Henry's one of them. When you watch film, when Henry gets to the second level, when people aren't used to playing him, it's a very different experience between trying to tackle him and then any other running back in the league. Because 1, he's enormous, and 2, he's faster than people realize. So for me this week with Henry, and again, I'm someone who's very willing to fade chalk. I don't think you can fade Henry because if you told me on Monday morning next week that Henry had 250 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns, it wouldn't surprise me at all, which is literally insane to even mention. His ceiling is ridiculous. That said, the path to failure in that game is, say the Titans defense scores 2 touchdowns. And they say Stafford doesn't play, and the Titans smoke Detroit. They're up 28-0 with 10 minutes left in the second quarter. Maybe Henry only plays, 35 minutes of the game. So I would love this game if Stafford was healthy and Golladay was in. Now I kind of think that the Titans legitimately blow the doors off of them. And I definitely view it that way if Stafford doesn't play.
What do you think, Cody?
Hold up just 1 second, Ryan. Because we've
been here I'm ready.
The past 3 weeks. We've been here the past 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Derrick Henry talk.
Yeah.
And I've been on the side of Ryan Tannehill plus 1 of A.J. Brown or Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith.
Mm-hmm.
So let me tell you one way that Derrick Henry can fail. And trust me, raise your hand if you've taken it on the chin with Derrick Henry because
yeah. I have too.
I've been wrong. I've been wrong when Derrick Henry smashes, and I've been wrong when Derrick Henry puts up a dud. So I'm fully expecting the 40-point Derrick Henry game this week. His baseline projection is maybe 150 yards and a touchdown. So the one way that he can fail, if we still think the Titans offense smashes this putrid Lions defense, is via the pass. And that just comes down to Corey Davis or A.J. Brown not falling down at the 1-yard line. Both of these guys have pretty respectable target shares. The Titans passing offense is pretty damn good. And what we really need, and we're hoping that Matt Stafford plays, but even if he doesn't, what we really need is we need the Lions to put some pressure on the Titans offense. We need them to at least make them feel like they need to continue to push the ball downfield. So if we get that, I've got some interest there. I think I think Henry's ownership is going to push 40%, maybe 35-40% in like the middle stakes $50 $100 entry tournaments.
The situation with Kamara might cut into that a little bit, but yeah, his ownership's still going to be very high.
You're right. We've just got like a full week of everybody touting this play, everybody talking about this play. The projection is there. People just got burned. Everything's setting up for Henry to just be an absolute smash. And now we've got value opening up on the Saints side. So like, I think there's a little bit more value than we started the week with. I think people can fit that $9,500 price tag in if they want. So all I'm saying is keep your mind open to the idea of Ryan Tannehill double stack. And he hasn't had to use his legs much this year, but there's still some rushing equity. He can still put one in with his legs if he has to. So yes, I think Derrick Henry is an incredible play. Like you will not catch me not playing Derrick Henry this week. I'll be careful about the lineups that I build around Derrick Henry. But yeah, I've got a lot of interest in a double stack with Ryan Tannehill and completely fading Derrick Henry in a lineup or a couple lineups, just for the simple fact if the touchdowns come through the air and they do hit or exceed their 30-ish 31 point team total, there's a lot of leverage there. And I will say that the bring back from the Lions side, whether it's Chase Daniels or whether it's Matt Stafford, is painfully obvious. And it's Marvin Jones, $5,700. He's a usage monster without Galladay, 22% target share, 38% air yard share, 7 end zone targets, and he's leading the league in air yards over the last 3 weeks. So yeah, like I said, if for some reason the Lions, if Stafford plays, that's great. But if the Lions are able to push the Titans, it's going to come via the pass, and it's going to come through Marvin Jones, I think. So it's probably low probability. But it's the type of play where if it pays off, we're cashing in a big way, because it probably means that Derrick Henry's failed. And a popular Derrick Henry that fails means that we're lapping 40% of the field in that case. So that's the type that I like in midfield or large field GPPs.
Yeah, this will end up being our single entry game stack. I can already tell.
Dwain, let me ask you.
You're not going to talk me off of it. It's been 3 weeks in a row, so I got to catch up somehow. I got to get even on my Ryan Tannehill stacks.
Dwain, let me ask you a little bit about these wide receivers. The Lions give up the 4th most points to wide receivers in the NFL at 42.1 points per game. We got A.J. Brown. He's 7,600. Corey Davis, who was quiet last week, but he's really been on fire 5 of the last 7 weeks. He's at 5,800. And then if you really want to try to squeeze in somebody else a little less, Jonnu Smith is 3,700. He's only got 30 yards receiving once since week 5. I don't know if I have a lot of interest in him. Talk maybe a little bit about the usage of these receivers and which one would you want to play, maybe if you're going to go multiple Titans.
Yeah, a couple quick things. Number one, back to what Cody was saying, I do think there is a path, and it doesn't because it has to be a shootout. It could just be very efficient, right? Ryan Tannehill could still just throw the ball 25 times. You get the exact script that Ryan's talking about. They blow the doors, off of Detroit. And Derrick Henry has, 140 yards rushing, but doesn't get the touchdowns. And I think that's the way that Derrick Henry doesn't get there. And I think it's plausible because if you look at the Lions, so they run cover one man, which is the most popular man coverage in the NFL. They run it more than anyone, and their cornerbacks are young and they're not very good. And so it's going to be very inviting. Ryan Tannehill multiple times in the game is going to see that he has single coverage with the guy that he wants, whether it's going to be Davis or whether it's going to be A.J. Brown. It's going to happen. And so if he sees 2 or 3 of those opportunities during the game, because the Lions play man so much, it could easily be a situation where, you score 3 touchdowns passing, you don't run a ton of plays in the game. We have seen the Titans be willing to slow things down. They've ran a lot more plays than they have last year, but we have had a couple of times this year where they've kind of pulled back on the reins, and just slowed it down. So I do think that can happen. As far as, the Titans go and, and the utilization over the last couple of weeks. So Jonnu Smith actually had a season high 80% route run per drop back last week. So only 20 routes, which isn't huge because they ran the ball so much, last week. But 80% is really high. That's the highest that he's seen. But it's like you said, Drake, he hasn't had a ton of huge games. He still only had 2 targets last week. He had 0 the week before. But the 2 weeks before that, he still had 6. The thing I like with Jonnu, is say he does get 4 or 5 targets. He is an athletic tight end. So unlike it's not that Jared Cook isn't athletic, but they give more run after the catch type opportunities to Jonnu Smith. If you're looking at Cook, it's more of a, hey, I'm going to hit you down the seam kind of thing. Jonnu gets the drags underneath. He gets the seam routes. They utilize him and they target him in more different areas of the field and give him an opportunity to use his athleticism. So I think he can score by being targeted in the end zone, or he can score by run after the catch, which typically isn't going to be the case for a guy like Jared Cook. As far as the receivers go, I mean, you really hit on him, Drake. And you did too, Cody. I mean, Marvin Jones, what we've seen over the last several weeks, is pretty insane. He's had 52%, 47%, and 48% of the air yards for the team. The thing you worry about, right, is if Stafford doesn't play, how far down does the average depth of target come, right? Because Chase Daniel is not a quarterback that typically or traditionally pushes the ball down the field, even though that is Bevel's offense. I do concern they rein that in, a little bit. But yeah, the air yards are ridiculous. 169, 258, 107. He's on the field running around basically every time they drop back to pass. The other guy that I would say from Detroit, that I would still be willing to look at would be TJ Hawkinson. Really, over the last 3 weeks, he's had his best 3 weeks of the year, 7, 9, and 9 targets. He's always a threat if they happen to be able to move the ball, which Tennessee is basically like they let everyone move the ball. I think Hawkinson still gives you, we haven't seen it yet, but I think he still gives you a 2-touchdown upside game, because he gets targeted a ton in the end zone. He's an athletic tight end, so he could give you one score where he catches it in the end zone. He can give you another score where he runs it in from 20 yards out, especially against a defense like this. So I think Hawkinson would be in play. Marvin Jones, would be in play. Those would be the main two. They're rotating all these other guys too much on the Detroit side. On the Tennessee side, you already named them. It's A.J. Brown. It's Corey Davis. That's, we talked about Jonnu to start off. I like both of them. I think you could play either one of them this week. I'll probably do a few lineups where the only change is I've got Corey Davis in one of them, and the next one I've got A.J. Brown. I'll have to tweak a couple other things just because it's going to open up salary, right? Going down from Brown to Corey Davis. But both of those guys, it's just like what Cody said. I mean, they get plenty of utilization, so they're both in play.
So you're listening to the DFS Hustle. I'm Brian Drake, joined alongside a crew of ETR guys. We've got Dwain McFarland, we've got Cody Main, we've got Ryan Reynolds. We hope you're enjoying the broadcast this weekend, however you're checking it out. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe. It really helps us out. And, of course, leave a review on iTunes or whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. Next game we're going to talk about is Colts and Texans. The Colts are -7. This has an implied total of 51.5. A great stat from TJ Hernandez on Twitter. The Texans have only gone over their implied team total 3 times this year, missing it last week by 16.5 points. So you're going to get maybe Brandon Cooks coming back. We got a bunch of cheap receivers here. Everyone likes to think, hey, the Houston's going to shoot out in all these games. But if you look at that, it just doesn't seem to happen. They've got this terrible defense, but they're just not scoring the points. So we got T.Y. Hilton in this game on the other side. He's crushed Houston. He's got like almost 100 catches, nearly 1,800 yards, and 11 touchdowns against the Texans his career. He just killed them 2 weeks ago, 8 for 110 and a touch. And we're going to get into, of course, Jonathan Taylor, 7,200. And the Lions are the only team that give up as many points to running backs as do these Texans. So, guys, let's get into this game. We got a lot to dig in here. Boy, oh boy, we love to try to squeeze Deshaun Watson in because of his dual threat availability. But maybe if Cooks isn't there, do we kind of want to shy off him? And if we're building stacks, I mean, could we talk Rivers here, or are we going to get pieces from this game? Maybe JT and a receiver, and then get the quarterback maybe naked somewhere else, like a Jalen Hurts. What are we talking about here in this game? Let's start with you, Ryan.
I like that stat because this is kind of how I see this game. The total is
51.5.
51.5. I also see this game the same way. If I were going to project a score, it would be Colts 31, Texans 17. I think the only way you bet on you stack this game directly is if you think Watson absolutely carries the Texans. They're limping along at this point. They just got destroyed by the Bears last week. where the Colts are, I don't want to say they're a better version of the Bears completely, because the Bears defense is probably better than the Colts, but they're a better offense, excellent offensive line. That's how I see this. I don't really, unless Watson literally plays out of his mind, I don't see how they push this game this time. I think they're done, more or less. One aspect that I think is interesting, everyone's T.Y. Hilton said back-to-back explosive games. It would make sense if Pittman had low ownership and he has a similar path. From a usage standpoint, what's Pittman look like the last couple of weeks since Hilton's gone off?
Yeah, so Pittman's actually still running more routes per drop back. The issue that Pittman has right now is they've really started using Hilton the last few weeks to stretch the field. So here are his ADOTs, 17.5, 15.2. He did have a 9.3 in there in week 13. Then last week, 20.1. So really being used in some of the ways we were used to seeing T.Y. Hilton be used, right, with Andrew Luck. The thing for Pittman, even though he's seeing more of the routes, he's the guy that's coming off the field at least 93% route run rate. Last week, he's been at 87 and 87 the 2 weeks before that. They are a team that, they like to rotate guys through, but that's still doable. His targets have been 8, 3, 8, and 5. But the biggest challenge, like for Pittman, really is that since they've started doing this deep stuff with Hilton, he's just been getting everything underneath. So here are his ADOTs over the last several games: 4, 9, 4, 6.5. So you need the volume to be there, basically, or you need him to break a long run after the catch, which he's a very physical player after the catch, and he can do some things, but he's not necessarily like a huge speed guy, right? That's just going to run away from everything. He's going to need some things to work out where DBs take wrong angles. Well, and if there's any team that's willing to do that, it's going to be the freaking Texans. They're terrible. So, I mean, I do agree, though, that it is a good pivot, off of Hilton. And Hilton, his underlying, utilization is still just like he's been at 87 and 87% the last 2 weeks with his routes run. But in these games where Indy just jumps all over people, we saw this earlier in the year. I mean, they'll just shut T.Y. Hilton down, and they'll just have guys out there that they think can run block. And I worry about that for Hilton this week if it happens the way you're talking, Ryan, where they just jump out on him, say in the first quarter, it's 17-0. I mean, we've seen them do that. So and even over the last 2 weeks or over the last 5 weeks, here are his snaps. It shows you they're protecting him. Part of it, I think, is veteran. They know he's a smaller guy. He's had injury history. They know they need him for the playoffs, but his snaps have been 67%, 61%, 73%, 62%, 67%. So all of a sudden you get in a game where either the dropbacks go way down because you're ahead all the time, right? Or you just get into a situation where it's a blowout and they just want to rest Hilton even more. I think we could see this as being a game where potentially, Hilton is not going to quite come through the way people hope. Now, the matchup's great. So really only he could come through on like 3 targets, because anytime you catch the Texans in man coverage, it basically turns into a touchdown.
Cody, let me ask you about Jonathan Taylor. He's a guy that, has a great chance at getting you that 100-yard bonus, 150 last week, 91 and 90 the weeks prior. Like I said, when I introed this game, the Lions are tied for the Texans are tied with the Lions for the most points allowed to running backs. He's even getting a couple of targets, which is nice. Is he a player at 7,200 you want to try to get in lineups, or is this a week? I mean, it's tough with that matchup. How can we not play this guy?
Yeah, you nailed it, and I think the guys nailed it on the game stack too. It's the one of, I think, 5 that we have that's the most concerning for me, and the one that probably gets the cut first. If I'm building 3 max or even 5 max, it's probably the one that I cut out first. To be honest with you, I just think it has the most paths to failure on the slate of the ones that we're going to be talking about tonight. And like you said, I think Jonathan Taylor's just set up to absolutely smash this Texans rush defense. And I think he's finally getting the usage that we wanted from him. I've joked on Twitter that he's Trent Richardson 2.0 in some of his rougher weeks, but he's not. He's a legitimate prospect. He's a legitimate running back, and he can absolutely run through this defense. So that would be my one concern. And the one thing with Kamara opening up at 7,400, JT being just $200 cheaper, I think he comes in fairly underowned. I think a lot of the field's going to gravitate towards Kamara in that matchup. Getting Breeze back, you can project him for a 20-ish plus % target share. So yeah, I think whereas JT was probably going to be a little bit chalky to start the week as kind of this second tier back behind Henry, I think the ownership is going to come down a little bit. So yeah, I have questions about the game stack as a whole. I don't know how much Deshaun Watson can, it's kind of the same situation as the Titans and Lions. Like Deshaun Watson's obviously a better quarterback, even if Stafford plays, but I just feel like the Colts can kind of run away with this game. And if that's the case, they're just going to lean on their ground game late in the game, and we're not going to see as much volume from the pass catchers. So, it might end up making the cut for me with like a Phillip Rivers double stack with both T.Y. Hilton and Pittman. But I think if there's one game that I'm going to cut, it's this one, and it's because JT.
All right, let's keep it moving on to our next contest, and it's the Falcons against the Bucks. And this one is Falcons +6. We've got a game total of 48.5. So there's no Julio. He was ruled out already. And that leaves Kelvin Ridley at 8,200 as the Falcons wide receiver, of choice, I would guess. I don't know if you guys want to go down to the Russell Gages of the world. I know Dwayne's had a soft spot. So we'll start here with you, Dwayne, on Tom Brady. 6,600. Falcons allow the most points to opposing quarterbacks, a little over 24 points a game. Now, he's not going to give you any rushing upside. We know that. But is there enough here with him throwing the rock, do you think, against kind of a Falcons team that they're always game? They lose a lot of games, but they're always up for it. Could you put Brady in there with no rushing upside, 6,600?
Yeah, I think you can. I mean, if you're going to stack this game, that's how you're going to stack it. It's going to be Brady with two receivers, in my opinion. I'm not that excited about Fournette. I don't know for sure what his role will be. Arians has shown he's willing to use all these different backs. So I think Fournette's ownership is probably going to come in my opinion, too high this week. And the Falcons just have been a better run defense than what most people think. Even though they may get their doors blown off, they don't give up a ton to running backs from a fantasy point perspective or from an NFL perspective. So as much heat as they may take, they've been pretty good against backs, but I do think their secondary can be absolutely lit up. So my problem with Brady, is it when on the weeks I choose to go with the Brady stacks is I feel like just to make all the stacks I want, like to get all the different combos of receivers I would want, it's like I'm already to like 50 lineups just on the Bucks, Mm-hmm. So that's the part. It's really hard with Brady to figure out. It can literally be, any of these guys, or it could be all of them, right? So one way you could approach it if you wanted, is potentially going with Brady and not stacking him with anyone. Let's say, because I think there's a good chance, right? It comes out where you have 4 different receivers score a touchdown, right, for the Bucks, and none of them be dominant. Now, I could also see it where, 1 or 2 of them take over and they go nuts. So I'm probably going to build them a little bit both ways. But if you look at the utilization, it's Godwin and Evans, start off at the top. Those are the 2 guys that are on the field the most. Then you got Antonio Brown and Gronkowski really as that next level. Those are like the tertiary weapons. But it's a very evenly spread offense. You don't have anyone seeing those 30% target shares. Like if you're the guy that gets 22% in a week, that's considered good, right, in this offense. And they're a decent offense as far as like the number of plays they run, but it's not like elite. But yeah, I have no problem with Brady. If I were to stack this game, that's the route that I'm going.
All right, we got the news that Rojo is going to be out. We're looking at Fournette. Cody, is that a guy that you're looking to get in there? And let's also ask you a little bit about this Falcons side. No Julio. We've got Ridley, who's expensive. You can never count on Hayden Hurst, any of these other kind of low-end guys. The running backs, forget it. What are we looking at stack-wise in this game?
Yeah, Dwayne nailed it. And that's part of the reason why, Ryan, this is one of my favorite stacks of the week. So this might end up being our single stack, our single entry stack of the week. I
feel like there should be a sounder for that single entry stack of the week.
We need to nail that because I'll say something and Ryan will just be like, "Oh shit, I'm not talking you off of that." So point when we're talking through main slate, but I like the fact that this game isn't easy to stack. There's a little bit of analysis paralysis in trying to pick who you want to pair Brady with, and I love what Dwayne said because you could absolutely, with some of the games we have on the slate, you could absolutely see Brady throwing one to Evans, one to Godwin, one to Brown, and even one to Gronk, just for good measure.
We'll get Scotty Miller, we'll get Cameron Brate, we'll get a tackle eligible.
But the thing is, like, Brady can absolutely do that, and that's the way he gets there with no rushing upside, and none of the receivers get there. I will say they're all priced pretty reasonably. Evans is 6,500, Godwin 6,200, and Antonio Brown's 5,400. As far as the Atlanta side goes, it's pretty obvious with Ridley as being the bring back, and I don't know how steamed ownership is going to get on him, even as like a standalone play. He's pretty expensive, and I think people are going to gravitate toward in guys that come in a little bit lower price than Ridley. But he's got a 27% target share, 45% air yard share in games that Julio's been out. He's really good at what he does. He's just gonna. I think he's gonna smash in the spot, and you're gonna see some negative in and out splits with Matt Ryan and Julio being out. I don't really care if Matt Ryan fails in this game because I'm not going to stack up that side of the game. I'm going to stack up the Tampa Bay side of the game. It's the fourth highest total on the main slate, and I think both of these offenses are going to go completely under-owned. Both of these teams rank top 10 in pass rate. Both are top 10 situation neutral pace. Uncle Lenny's going to be a little bit popular, I think, now with some of the news that we've gotten over today. I think the ownership might come down a little bit, but he's still going to be pretty popular. So you get a little bit of leverage off there if you're going Brady double stacks. And I wanted to ask Dwain what his thoughts were on Antonio Brown's plummeting snap rate last week, because he played like 46% of snaps last week. Do you think that was as a result of him, as a result of Tampa Bay playing from ahead for most of the game, or do you think that was something that they decided to switch with regards to his usage going forward?
Yeah, I think it was probably more to do with them playing from ahead. It's hard to tell, but if you look at his routes, right, that didn't really move. So here are his routes over the last several weeks. Routes run per drop back: 61%, 61%, 69%, 76%. Last week he was still at 64%. So he was, when they were throwing the ball, he was still getting on the field. So the way I look at it is it's more of a situation where they were ahead, so they ran the ball more. That means you've got less dropbacks, so that brings your snaps down. And that's why looking at the routes is so important. You can see that overall his role in the passing game didn't change a lot. But hearing those numbers, you can see why Brown is so hit or miss, right? If you got a guy that's only going to be out there for 60% of the routes, that's really dicey. It's hard to nail that, but he is priced good enough, that you can easily work him in. And he's still a guy that it wouldn't probably surprise anybody on this show. Like if he, came up with 80 yards and 2 touchdowns, right? I mean, we know that's within his range of outcomes. So I'm fine with that, but I think it was more just the game script.
Ryan, how are you going to bet this game?
I find this game to be pretty interesting because the Falcons are an unreliable team with a very high ceiling. We saw last year at this point in the season where they were floundering and underachieving that they knocked off the 49ers randomly. Came off with a big lead on them. I'm not saying that's going to happen this week, but one of the ways this game can go is Atlanta plays their A game and they play up to their competition, and this game turns into a shootout where Brady's playing from behind. So that's something I'm very interested in. The Bucs defense owns A-gap, so I don't think the Falcons are going to be able to run at all. They have excellent range at linebacker, so that also, again, I don't think Atlanta's going to struggle to run the ball. So if Julio was playing, this game would be fascinating from that aspect. Now that he's not, Bowles blitzes a lot. I'm sure Dwain could tell you more about that specifically than I can, but Bowles is willing to blitz against anyone from what I've seen. And that can lead to big plays, which would play into the narrative of maybe if Atlanta plays up, they exceed expectations themselves, similar to how the Chargers jumped out on Tampa and Brady came back. Because like you guys said, Evans is wonderfully priced. Godwin's wonderfully priced. You can double stack them very reasonably. I personally like Godwin, I think, the most this week from that side. But I also find a double stack of Brady, Godwin, it should probably be more expensive than it is. I'm probably less afraid of playing Gage on the other side, but
sure,
I do understand that's a little thin as well. But at some point, we have to save salary as well. So I would assume that Tampa, because Bowles is a real defensive coordinator, he's going to look at that game and be like, Ridley's obviously their alpha. So we're gonna throw different looks at him to make Ryan move to other targets. And Gage is the second most reliable target in that offense. So that's how I see that. On the other hand, with the running game for Tampa, we don't know who's going to play. But if Atlanta fails again offensively, Tampa could run away with this one as well. So I'm gonna play this game from two different directions in my tournaments. I'm gonna play it a little bit as a stack, a little bit as a mini correlation, but I'll also have some of the Bucs defense as well.
You're a big defense guy. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Because in our conversations leading up to this show, you've told me how you've got a knack for picking good DFS defenses and out in that.
Usually,
so, give me a couple this week as we transition out of that game. Any defenses you're into this week? Maybe the Bucs, maybe the Patriots. Who are you into in terms of a defense if people are looking to I
would actually like to talk about the Patriots a little bit because people are going to be going to be interested in them because of how Herbert fared against them. I don't think this is the same situation. I think this is more of a rock throw game because New England's not really going to be able to score in Miami either. So that's going to limit the opportunities for Tua to hand. Because what Belichick does to young quarterbacks is he overloads them from a processing standpoint. He makes them read a lot. He makes them try to figure out what they're doing, and that results in mistakes. So if they don't have to throw, meaning unless the Patriots can get out to an early lead, that's the only way that play works. Because I think a lot of the other side of that is if that game ends up being 17-13, that wouldn't surprise me. Mm-hmm. This is actually a week where on FanDuel, if the Rams scored 30 points this week, I don't think that would surprise me at all. If they shut out the Jets and scored once or twice themselves, I mean, that game, you can't play them on DraftKings because they're too expensive, but that game is an obvious smash spot. You could play Miami against New England. Most of the defenses this week are 2,900 or higher, where usually I like to have one that's cheaper. And I don't want to, Atlanta doesn't really have a very good chance to exceed expectations here because Brady doesn't really turn the ball over very much. Mm-hmm. But Atlanta is a defense. They have good interior play. They play a lot of zone. So they're a team that can, pick one off and run it back where no one thinks they can. But I don't really like any of the cheap defenses this week, unfortunately.
All right. Let's move on to our next contest.
And the Bucs blitz the fourth most in the league. So Ryan was correct.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Let's hit the last big stack we're going to talk about here, and that's Ravens-Jags. This is a game total of 48. It is the Ravens are minus 13. So that's a big number. Now, this is an ailing Ravens defense. Now, everyone kind of thinks, Ravens defense is great. I just watched Baker Mayfield walk up and down the field on this defense on Monday night. And now they're going to be down a corner, possibly two. We're going to get Gardner Minshew back for the Jags. DJ Chark, maybe we get a little mojo going here. Lamar's 7,500. He looked like the old Lamar last week. Jags give up the fourth most points to quarterbacks. So, Cody, let me ask you, maybe do we go a naked Lamar because who knows what's up with Hollywood Brown? He doesn't have great options around him. And, can we bring back anything on the other side with Chark and Minshew maybe? What are you thinking in this game?
Can I interest you in a low-owned Willie Snead?
Hey, Keelan Cole, Willie Snead. We're saving money left and right. Let's go.
No, but seriously, if Hollywood's ruled out, I think the way that this game's going to be stacked, if it is stacked at all, and it might not be, and if that's the case, then I'll just stack it straight up. If I don't think ownership's going to congregate towards this game, then I'll just play Lamar with Mark Andrews, and I'll correlate the pesky tight end position because we know tight end sucks.
Yep.
So I'll get Mark Andrews, who might be the only guy that can compete with Travis Kelce on any given slate. And I will run it back because I think if Lamar is going to hit his ceiling, I think he needs at least to be pushed a little bit. And actually, Dwain partially is responsible for getting beyond this. So I'm going to give you all the credit and all the blame if this fails. But I actually didn't look into how bad Jake Luton and Mike Glennon were until I heard you guys' show last week. But now that Minshew's back, he has a 75.4% on-target pass rate, which is perfectly fine. I mean, it's better than Burrow. It's better than Matt Ryan. It's better than Baker Mayfield. Glennon and Luton were at 68 and 65% respectively when they were playing. So, discounting DJ Shark and even Keelan Cole and whoever else in that Jaguars offense from the pass catching standpoint is I think a mistake this week. Just given the fact that they get Minshew back. So yes, if I'm going to stack this game, I'm going to have somebody coming back. If I get the sense that like the Lamar the Lamar naked or Lamar plus Andrews is going to get pretty popular, then I'll consider pivoting away from it. But I think he's the one quarterback on the slate with rushing upside. You don't need to double stack him because he gets 40 rushing touchdowns. I think if you pair him with one receiver, whether that's Andrews or if Hollywood's out, you can pair him with Snead. I think you can get away with that, honestly. I really do. Snead's actually had pretty good usage, and I know Dwain can touch on this, but he's had like 4 games over the last 5 weeks above 20% target share. So in the sense that if the Ravens are actually pushed to throw the ball a little more than they have been, I think you can see a reasonable output out of Snead. So it's one game that I'm definitely interested in, and one game that I'm going to play in a way that I think if the Jags can keep it close, I think Lamar can put up a slate winning type score.
What do you think, Dwain?
Yeah, if I'm running it back, it's Chark. I mean, why stop now? We've told people like 3 weeks in a row. Might as well just stick it out. I mean, he's at 131 and 144 air yards over the last 2 weeks. It's not for a lack of trying. It's just a lack of quarterback talent. And we know that he and Minshew, they can get on the same page really quickly. The Ravens, obviously their corners, can be problematic, but they've been pretty inconsistent this year, as well. So Peters has had a little bit of a down year. Marlon Humphreys can definitely be a problem. So you don't want him shadowing you all game. But Chark is that kind of receiver that, Humphrey could end up still playing a really good game, and you could still have Chark come through just on 1 or 2 plays because of the way that he gets used in the offense. So, yeah, and I don't typically when I play Lamar, and I'm not near as good as these two guys at DFS, but I almost never double stack Lamar. It's because of what, Cody just said. But I do like the thought. I do like stacking my quarterbacks with the tight ends because the tight end spot, I like the way you described it, Cody, pesky. It is a pesky position to deal with. So I almost just want to get that touchdown catch, coming, with my quarterback. And honestly, it's probably just a lazy out because it helps me pick my tight end. I just double stack. I throw the tight end in with the quarterback that I use plus another receiver quite often. So we talked about Chark. The one other guy I'll just touch on utilization wise, and then let's get, Ryan's thoughts, on the game. I tweeted out about this earlier, this week is Dobbins, he was starting to take over before the COVID issue hit, and so the first week back, it was really it kind of was back to the way it was at the beginning of the year. But then this past week, we saw it starting to get more back to what we had seen before he got COVID. And so that was a snap rate of 62%. He was on the field for 62% of first downs. He got 100% of the 2-minute offense. He did share the short down and distance work with Gus Edwards, 50%, to him. He does still have to deal with a quarterback that can run at any time. So that's problematic as well. But it's an offense that's willing to run the ball, more than any other offense in the entire league. So it kind of makes up for, some of the issues that you have, whereas if you look at a team like Buffalo and you've got 3 backs, but they throw the ball 65 to 70% of the time, right? So there's just not room for 3 backs here. And I'm the third back being Josh Allen, which really he's like the RB1. But same thing for Baltimore, but you just have way more running plays. Inside the 5, he's getting, this is Dobbins again, 66%. The only thing he's coming off the field for is long down and distance. And it's just wacky because the guy that's knocking him off the field is Justice Hill. That's the guy the last 2 weeks they've given the long down and distance work to. So J.K. Dobbins is a play that I don't think he's going to be used a ton. I haven't looked at him. So you guys may be able to, Cody, he may be higher than I think. But Dobbins is a guy that I wouldn't mind getting into a few lineups as well, especially if this game goes the way, that we have it, which is a Ravens blowout.
Let me interject here with this.
I'm glad you brought it up because I want to ask you again real quick because you brought it up. I think Dobbins is a great play. I don't think he's going to get ownership at all. The one thing I want to ask you about is why is he splitting goal line carries with Gus? Is it like totally random? Do you think there's something there?
Yeah.
He's
my concern too.
He's not splitting the
receivers, so he's like on the wrong side of a 60-40 split at the goal line, which is the only reason I have concern. Like I think you can totally get 100 yards rushing from him, as given the fact that they're like a double-digit home favorite against one of the league's worst rush defenses. But I do have question marks. Like if he happens to just be off the field when they're inside the 10, then I don't care if he has 100 yards. I want him to have 100 yards plus 2 touchdowns. I don't understand why he's on the wrong side of that.
Yeah, so that's actually improved too. And so like the numbers I just gave you, I like because, plays inside the 5 are so rare. I like looking at the snaps inside the 5 versus just, the attempts. And so if you look at over the last couple of games, it's 66% inside the 5 going to Dobbins. And then if you go back and you add in the game where he kind of started to take over the backfield, I gotta scroll back up to where I was at to see that information. So on that week, he was at, again, this is a small sample, but that week inside the 5, so he had 100%, of the snaps inside the 5 that week. But there weren't, and again, these are small samples. Like when we say snaps inside the 5, like listeners, like 5 would be a ton. Normally, like a lot of times in a week, you'll have offenses that won't have any snaps inside the 5, so the sample sizes are really small, so it can be kind of tricky. That's why I think it's good, like Cody brought up, inside the 10, inside the 20. It's good to look at those two and take everything into context. But overall, I think Dobbins is trending, in the right direction. Gus Edwards has been less of an issue inside the 5 lately, but he is still getting short down and distance work, which means he still could be part of the inside the 5 plan. He just wasn't the guy that happened to be on the field whenever they got down there. It could have just been that Dobbins was on the field. So I totally concede that it's a small sample size. It's hard to say. All I can say is the trend. It's all we have. It's the data we have. It's pretty good for Dobbins right now. So I'm hopeful, right, that they just let him run with it, but it could go the other way too.
I think the one thing you want to know with Dobbins is that it's not intentional. Him being taken off the field inside the 5 or 10-yard line. If it's fluky and Gus runs away with 2 touchdowns, that's fine. But you just want to make sure that you're not playing a guy who's intentionally being taken off the field inside the 5 or 10-yard line.
And I'll say that's not the case. No, that's not what's going on for sure.
Yeah. And like I said, as a double-digit favorite at home against the Jags defense, there's just no reason for him to be as low owned as he is. So it's one of those ways where he's actually pretty cheap. His price came down after the past 2 weeks, where he's really kind of shown he's the alpha in the Ravens backfield, in my opinion, even though the box score results haven't really been there. But the fact that his price came down a little bit is one of those guys that we can kind of fit in with those more popular cheap Saint stacks to make things kind of work out for us.
Yeah, he's the number 20 running back in terms of price on DraftKings. He's behind, look, this is insane. He's behind Alexander Madison, Zeke Elliott, James Conner. Rojo, they didn't know when he was going to get ruled out. And the Jaguars give up the 3rd most points on the year to running backs. And I just wanted to check in on this. I mentioned it when I was previewing the game. The Ravens have already ruled out Jimmy Smith, and it looks like 4 other corners are listed as questionable. They only have Marlon Humphrey, who doesn't have an injury designation. So pretty banged up on the back end here in Baltimore. Ryan, any thoughts on this game?
Harbaugh is one of those. Harbaugh is one of the coaches that will literally list like the whole team is questionable. He's like Bill Belichick, like when it comes to that stuff. So basically, questionable doesn't mean anything. You want to see doubtful or out. All those guys are probably going to play.
The Jaguars are beat up too, their corner group. But if Hollywood plays, he's interesting to me. I love Lamar this week. I will play him alone. I will play him with Hollywood. At this point, I probably need to consult the priest about my DFS tight end plays. So I'm going to probably stay away from Mark Andrews. I wanted to talk to you guys about the running back situation because I think this is the rare situation where you can actually play Jackson in a running back. Because if the Ravens score 5 touchdowns and they get all of them on the ground, That's actually possible this week. And I'm with you too, Brian. I think Minshew can push this game. I think this is an over. I think both teams beat their implied total. I'm also going to be playing Chark. I'm not afraid of his past failures. I'll also play Cole as well because Cole, you guys are the usage guys. Cole has stable usage pretty much every week, and every once in a while he gets a major swell, right?
Yeah. So his routes are great. So he's been up in the 88, 91, even he's had a 100%, route run game, per drop back in the last several weeks. It's just like so he's out there all the time. It's just a matter of, is he going to have his 6-4 target game, or is he going to get a 12 target game? This was a season high, last week. But the other thing, the biggest thing for me with Cole versus what it was early in the year is the way they utilize him. So early in the year, he was kind of the mid-range underneath guy. So you had layers, like Chenault was running all the shallow drag stuff. Then you had Cole working in behind him, and then you had Chark, stretching the defense. The thing with Cole now, if you look over the season, he's had multiple games where his air yards have been, 115, 188, 117, 140, where he's actually being used more down the field. So that makes me more willing to use him. If I know that his range of outcomes, I don't just have to project, the targets. I know there's also a range of ways they could use him. And so if they're willing to push the ball down the field to him, then that's helpful, especially if for some reason Chark does get shadow coverage all day from Marlon Humphrey.
Right, exactly. That's my angle with there, because I don't really care about LaVisca, generally speaking.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm not into that. But yes, I'm very interested.
Let me ask you guys, there's a name we haven't mentioned in this contest, and he's a top 5 fantasy running back, and that's James Robinson. Now, some people maybe forget, James Robinson is a nice story and all that. The Ravens are in the top 15 of running back points allowed on the season. I'm not saying that they're going to give up a big chunk here. He's a guy who's going to stay on the field. In the past 3 weeks, he's got 15 targets. What do we think about James Robinson? No one's going to play this guy.
Agreed. No one is. I get him wrong usually. I don't understand the James Robinson thing. I don't understand. You know what I mean? I've been every year, we all get things wrong. That's one where I didn't see this coming. But I agree. I think this is an underrated matchup for him. We're probably looking at sub 5% ownership, especially with the Kamara rising in that price range. And
easily, yeah.
What kind of passing game usage does he have week to week?
I mean,
that's where I see his value this week.
Yeah,
he catches almost everything thrown at him. I mean, he's got this last 3 weeks, 4, 6, and 6 targets. Yeah. He caught 4, 6, and 5 of them.
Yeah,
it's good when Chris Thompson's out.
Right.
So he's got 4, 2, 5, 6, 4 targets. And then his percentage of team rushing attempts is insane. It's higher than anybody. 92%, 96%, 92%, 100%, 88%, 78%, 86%. My main thing with Robinson right now, I don't know how healthy he is. I think he's dinged. I think his knee is bothering him. But I agree with Drake. I'm not super scared of Baltimore's run defense.
No, it's not what it used to be. No, it's not.
Right. You saw what Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt did to him on Monday night.
Right.
I mean, those guys are very, very good running backs, but still.
Yes.
Well, they've built their team to build leads and then shut down the passing game, right? That's how they've just decided to invest their money, and they've invested a bunch of money that way. And even the linebackers they've drafted are really more of the coverage type of linebackers. So you can get downhill on them and you can push them down the field. Now, the last couple of weeks, I think they had been missing one of their primary defensive tackles, Williams. I don't see him on the injury report this week. I can't remember. He may have played last week, but I know he was coming off of an injury, so it looks like they'll have him back. But Drake, you did say on I was looking at the injuries. So Marcus Peters, you heard me earlier say, "Oh, well, Harbaugh lists everybody as questionable." I bet he doesn't play. He's been
he's out.
Yeah, he's DNP. So yeah,
he's listed as out. So We kind of have a little list here. I know we said we want to go an hour. We're already at an hour and 15. That's how things happen here on the Hustle Show, folks. Hope you're enjoying it. Let's talk about some of these contrarian running back plays. Maybe people that were not looking to go in with anybody else on their team. But let's talk and start with Miles Sanders. He's gotten Jalen Hurts, so he had a huge week last week. He broke off, a 70-plus yard run. Going up against an Arizona defense, that can be had via the run. What do you guys think of Miles Sanders in the desert this week? Cody, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think most encouraging for Sanders last week was that he got back up to 81% of the snaps. And he's going to lose some rushing work now that Hurts is there. But I think, and I don't have anything available right now, but I think any of the studies that you find are going to show that running backs with rushing quarterbacks are more efficient. So anything that Sanders loses in terms of actual rushing work, he'll make up for in efficiency, just because the defense has to account for someone as dynamic as Hurts.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a lot of interest there. The way he's priced on this slate at 6,900, you've got Cam Akers at 6,600. You've got Jonathan Taylor at 7,200. You've got Alvin Kamara at 7,400. I think if there's a guy in that kind of mid to upper price range that's going to go completely overlooked, that has a shot at slate winning type upside, it's Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I think they're incentivized to give him back kind of his lead back bell cow role.
I saw an interesting stat from Dwain's PFF buddy Andrew Erickson. I mean, this doesn't really have to do with Sanders, but it kind of does. The Cardinals have allowed the fifth most rushing yards and ranked 27th in explosive run percentage allowed to QBs. So they're going to see a healthy dose of RPOs. Everything the Eagles do now is super schemed up. It's one read for Hurts, and it's pretty elementary wing T type offense they're running here in Philly these days. So I don't know. I like what you're saying, Cody. I think he could have a real opportunity here, and if he breaks off an 80-yard run like he's ought to do, then here he goes, and you're off to the races. Well, who else do you like here? Let me go to you, Ryan, in terms of these contrarian running back plays, because you made the list, and you've got Jeff Wilson on here. We know that Raheem Mostert now is going to play. So I've got a ton of questions on Twitter. People are like, do I play Mostert? Do I play Wilson? And that's kind of in a season-long mindset. But in terms of a DFS lineup, what do we do with these two guys? And Dwain can get into utilization. We know they want to pound the rock. So I'm really interested with these two San Fran running backs.
Yeah, Mostert's definitely not good news in that situation, because there's games where he'll have 8 carries and Wilson will have 5, or Coleman will have 5, etc. So that strikes me as there'll be a committee this week now, where if Mostert missed, maybe Wilson sees his usage swell in a game where the 49ers lead, where now I'd probably lean away from all of them, just because Mostert it seemed like he was trending more towards doubtful until today. Would you guys agree with that?
Now he's got no designation. He's just good to go.
That's actually a surprise to me. So the thing with him is, because I would say he's vastly the superior back in that backfield. And as Dwain will often say, we love Shanahan backs. Doesn't matter who's playing. Whoever gets the most usage, we want them. But now, and I'll hand this off to the Ushis guy, but I don't think there's going to be enough to feed all of them now.
Yeah, it is interesting. I don't know at what point Mostert got hurt in the game last week. That was actually like something I had written down that I wanted to go back and check. So I don't know if you guys know. I know he ended up, on the injury report early this week. Did he not play the fourth quarter or something like that last week, or do you guys know?
I'm not sure about that. I know in waivers, I wasn't aware of that he was not significantly injured, but in danger of missing until after I already submitted my column. So I think that came later.
So
okay, good. See, I was in the same spot. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Cody. What?
He played 46% of the snaps, I want to say, last week. He got dinged up. And the reason why Ryan was so excited about Jeff Wilson is Jeff Wilson played every snap that Mostert wasn't there.
Right.
They used him like a special team specialist. He didn't play offense at all. So I think coming into the week, Wilson was a much better play than he ended the week as. there's still some outs. Like he's not going to be owned at all. If you're playing a KC Saints stack and you're looking for a way to be different than the field, like there's a chance that Mostert's just active for emergency purposes. I don't think it's
right.
But I mean, there's still pass there, but I think he's a significantly worse play than he was coming into the week.
See,
Agreed.
last week, Mostert was still playing in the fourth quarter. That's why I was surprised, like you,
Right.
Ryan.
Me too.
So I don't know how much it was him being dinged versus it truly being we're just going to split it versus it being Shanahan hot hand. He just saw they were both running well, and so he let Wilson continue to work. But here's what I'll say. I mean, it's been pretty consistent as far as like Shanahan, that kind of offense goes over the last couple of weeks. Wilson's been at 46 and 49% of the snaps. Mostert has been over the last 40, 44, and 49% of the snaps. They're both in. Wilson sees a little bit more work in the passing game, 45% route run per drop back over the last 2 weeks, 23% and 36% for Mostert. And part of that is Jerick McKinnon basically falling off the face of the planet. He had 39% of the routes in week 12. Week 13, that was down to 3. And then last week, like you guys said, he wasn't even on the field. Like so it's really just being split, between the two guys. And as far as the attempts go, Mostert gets a little bit more of the work than Wilson. So Wilson gets a little more of the work in the passing game. Mostert gets a little bit more of the work, just from an attempt standpoint. Mostert's been at 47%, 43%, and 50%. The last 2 weeks, Wilson's been at 33% and 39% of the rushing attempts.
So before we get out of here, I want to hit you guys. Give me one play, maybe someone we haven't talked about yet that you're itching to get into a lineup. And I'll start, and it's Brandon Ayuk. He's got 115 yards and or a touchdown in 6 straight and 8 of his last 9. He is, geez Louise, he's priced just so insanely well this week. Where's Brandon Ayuk? He is the number 21 most expensive wide receiver at 6,300 going up against Dwain's Cowboys. So if I can pit him in a lineup with no Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk is my guy. So Dwain, let's go to you. Who do you love this week?
I'm looking at the way I look at this is really around ownership. Like if I just want to say who's in a smash spot that I love having in a lineup, I do think that Akers has truly taken over the backfield.
Okay.
For the Rams, and his price is great. They're going to lead. They're playing at home. Like it literally checks every box, right? Other than all of a sudden he fumbles or just doesn't look good on the first drive, and McVay could derail everything. But other than that, like everything looks great, for Akers. I'm putting Akers in all my season-long lineups where he's still available. I'm using him over Dobbins. So I really do believe that he has this role. But I'll let the other two guys go, and we'll come back to me because I want to try to give one where I don't think there will be as much ownership because I do think that Akers is going to be pretty well owned, right? It won't be huge just because it's going to be kind of top-heavy this week. Like ETR's got him at 19% right now, projected ownership. So he's going to be right around that 20% mark.
All right. Anybody you like here, Rye?
I know I'll be overweight on Godwin. I'm also going to gamble on McLaurin's upside a little bit. Seattle's kind of improved in this way recently, but Seattle historically has trouble with true alpha receivers. They don't really game plan for them as well as they could. And Haskins kind of has tunnel vision when McLaren's in, with McLaren. So I don't really think much of Haskins as an NFL quarterback, but I like the spot. They're probably going to be playing from behind. So I'll be overweight on McLaren.
All right. What do you think, Code?
Yeah, and to Ryan's point on McLaurin, you got to remember that like in these tournaments where the field knows they need to stack these guys that aren't obvious stack candidates like McLaurin, because no one's going to stack Seattle and Washington, they're going to naturally come with lower ownership. So that's pretty sharp. I like that. I think he popped on the Hermsmeyer buy low model too. So that's good there. I have Kenyan Drake is one guy that like if I'm playing a popular KC and New Orleans stack, is the guy that I'm going to try and get in. I think his ownership is going to come down with the news that we've got, Kamara available and things like that. He's 4th overall in the league in carries inside the 5-yard line this season with 18. averaging 61.1% share of the team's rushing attempts. He's a touchdown home favorite now against your Eagles, Drake. And
we need the draft pick. I hope we win by 50.
And now he's got Chase Edmonds questionable. I don't know if that's changed since we started the show or since I haven't learned the season.
We could potentially stack him up with the Cardinals defense too. Oh, sorry.
They just seem Clips incentivized to run near the goal line, and a lot of that's coming through Kenyan Drake because teams are focusing in on Kyler Murray. I think there's there's 100-yard plus 2 TD upside there.
I know before we go to Dwain, let me run this by Ryan because I was just thinking of this. When we're talking Arizona defense, okay?
Right.
And people are going to look at what Jalen Hurts did last week, not getting sacked, not turning the ball over. That's in a game script where he had a big lead the entire game. Right. Let's say that flips, and now the Eagles are trailing. And, the Cardinals are 2,900 this week, but maybe now they'll be super low owned because of that. And now Hurts has to turn the ball over a little bit, and they get some pressure on him, and he runs around, gets sacked for loss, maybe fumbles the ball a little bit. So I think they're going to be a low-owned defense that could blow up in the right game script.
Right. They're in my player pool too, and like Cody said, we discussed Drake a little bit. I can already see how our single entry lineup's going to go. We're probably going to have Drake in the Cardinals defense. When Hurts was at Alabama, he was not a real quarterback, is what I'll say. I don't know what they did to him in Oklahoma, but they completely turned his ability to throw the ball around. So I wouldn't call him an elite passer, but he's a capable passer. But like you said, he's a rookie quarterback making his second start on an offense that struggled all year. And if they fall behind, like they very well could, I'm with you on that. I think Arizona's a solid play as well.
Dwain, what do you find anybody you like?
Man, there's nothing like just popping off like to me right now, like huge as far as under own. Like most of the ownerships I'm looking at they look right, So I mean, there's definitely going to be some guys that I'm going to be over on. One guy I see only 3%, and he'll probably be on the field for 70% of the work this weekend, is going to be McKissick, because I expect Washington to trail Seattle, even though Washington's defense is good. And so in the games where we know that they've got, whenever Washington gets down, we know those are the great games for McKissick, and that's when he's capable of, putting up 6-10, receptions. The problem is Alex Smith loves to check down the ball, and so now that's gone. It's like what Ryan said, which is really what I need on my PC team. I need Terry McLaurin to go nuts, and I'm also fine if Dwayne Haskins throws a pick six to the Seattle defense, because I have both. This has been a good show for me. Like the guys that you guys like are all in my actually this one's in the Football Guys Players Championship lineup. I got Henry, I got Jonathan Taylor, I got Terry McLaurin. You guys are making me feel better about my lineup, especially since
enormous, man. Enormous ceiling for that team. Yeah, I'm with you on McKissick too, because that Seattle style of cover 3 lends well to checkdowns, the running backs as well. So I think that has a really good path too.
Oh, there you go, folks. Anything else before we get out of here, guys? You want to throw at the audience?
Thank you for tuning in.
Yeah.
Maybe next time there'll be some mutual drinking going on here. Maybe we'll have a drink contest. Maybe we'll have a scoring contest, Dwayne.
Hey, let's do it.
So if you liked it, again, folks, go over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button, like this show, leave a good comment. Tell us who some of your plays are for the week. We'd love to read that stuff. It is read. Don't think it just goes off into the abyss. We definitely check it out and talk about it. So if you want to read more of these guys, fantastic work. It is over at establishthorun.com. Everybody knows Evan Silva and Adam Levitan, and they're great guys, and they're super smart, but there are some amazing, amazing talents that are also putting in hard-earned hours over there at the site. So go see these 3 guys. Dwayne's also at pff.com. Tons of smart guys over there too. And if you want to read my Drake's Takes article, it is at fightingchancefantasy.com. At Fighting Chance, we got a new thing now. We got a guy overseas doing English Premier League DFS. So if that's your biscuit, go get it over there. But again, Cody Main at CMain7, Ryan Reynolds at Ryan Reynolds NFL, and of course, the great Dwain McFarland at Dwain McFarland. I am at Drake Fantasy. Thank you, folks. Have a great week, and hopefully we're going to get some good comments at FF Hustle where everyone just won $1 bazillion, and you're going to cut a little check to us. So have a good weekend, folks. We'll see you back here next time. Take care.